Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Andrew Renee podcast. Today we have a guest on, Josh Gomez. He is the CEO and founder of Qiwi. It is, from my understanding, a CBG cigarette company.
Yes.
And yeah, so I will let Josh give a little bit of an intro and then we'll get into things.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to talk about the company without just giving like a little nugget of context. Um, I was prescribed a bunch of Adderall years ago, right? And a lot of Adderall for most people is like 30 milligrams. I was prescribed 400 milligrams per day for like a period of 6 months. Yeah. I was prescribed this because I had this weird gut issue, right? I was metabolizing medications way too quickly where I wouldn't be able to gain the beneficial effects. So when a 12-hour dose lasts me 1 hour, my doctor's response was, okay, we're just gonna increase it by 800% and see how it works. So I'm just following instructions, and over the course of those 6 months, I'm blacking out. I'm really having the same consequences you would have if you abused amphetamines and things like that. And after 6 months, enough was enough. It was destroying my personality. It was destroying, my social relationships, my performance at school and at work. I've always been like the soft, goofy kid who's like just very bubbly, very happy. All of that was gone. I was like this cutthroat, cruel, like sadistic dude in the sense of that's how I came across. Like my energy was just cold and dull. If you look at me, I'm not looking at you. I'm looking through you. I'm looking at your forehead or like anywhere but your eyes, right? I'm just glossing over things. Right. So after 6 months, I cut it cold turkey without thinking of the consequences. Growing up, I was a shy kid, right? But I was never an anxious kid. I never had like my throat close up or my cheeks like swell up and get red, anxiety attack symptoms. And within the week that I had cut the Adderall usage out, I go to CVS, I bought like toothpaste or something. There was this cute cashier and she asked me, oh, like cash or credit? And in that moment, I couldn't speak. I started stuttering really badly. My throat started closing, so I couldn't breathe. I got like hives on my skin or some weird reaction. And I had almost like a mini like seizure. I had like really severe tremors. And I'm there playing it off. Oh, I'm okay. And I go to my car and I'm catching my breath and I'm like, whoa, this sucks. I really hope this is like a one-off thing. And I'm expecting that maybe once a month or, under weird circumstances. It was as frequent as, every other day, basically. After a couple of months, I realized this is worse than the Adderall. I need to address this somehow. So I got diagnosed with anxiety and stress disorders, and I didn't want to take benzos. I still had that medication quirk where I would need a lot more medication than the average person. So I imagine like taking, 4 times the amount of benzos that you're supposed to, right? Medicinal cannabis was the one thing that worked really, really well. What's the catch? It gets you high. And when I get high, I remember that I get anxious, like extremely anxious. So it's like, do I want to be anxious naturally, or do I want to have THC induced anxiety? I discovered hemp, which was basically, medicinal cannabis with varying levels of the medicinal cannabinoids without the THC factor. Now came the fact that I never had like that stoner culture phase in my life. So I never learned how to roll properly. I'm there at my computer. I had an IT job in Manhattan, and I'm there with a grinder, grinding non-THC weed in my bathroom, trying to roll my first like joint so I could feel better while I'm shaking, going, okay, well, this isn't going to work either, right? Finally, I discovered CBD cigarettes, and it was a lifesaver. It's like buying a pack of cigarettes, but each cigarette has no chemicals. It's just CBD flower, and it has a high enough dosage, and it's a smokable, so it's instant. I should be good to go. Catch there was they're not using the buds, right? That would be prohibitively expensive. So they're using they're using what's left on like the factory floor after trimming, right? The shake, the trim, the stems, all of that stuff just gets blended up, and then they shove it into cigarettes and they test it, and they go, oh, it tests high enough where we could call it, it has this dosage of CBD, but it's all like very low quality plant material. So for my own sake, right, I wasn't trying to start a business in the first place. I really just wanted something to improve my quality of life. Finally, after at 4 a.m., like on February, 2020, I'm on this chat with this farmer who had a bunch of really, really good CBD flower. He was making cigarettes for himself as well for his like back pain and things like that, because he was a veteran. And I basically said, hey, if you work with me, right, I will build that business for you, basically, right? I really just want this to exist. Frankly, I tried your cigarettes. They were really exactly what I was looking for. Full flower, extremely high dose CBD cigarettes. We weren't talking 30 or 50 milligrams. We were talking 130 milligrams per stick. So I could, instead of me chain smoking 5 during my lunch break, I could smoke 1 and have like the sedation I needed to go back to work and get on the phone and not stammer through my words. And then bit by bit, it turns out, okay, well, as a farmer, I want to do what I'm good at, which is farming. I want you to build the business. I want you to run it. Like, it can be all you. And all I want you to do is to emphasize production, right? Just make sure you do right by us and we'll do right by you. We shook hands, and that was it. I ended up seeking investment. I closed a little bit of investment right before the pandemic closed, just enough for inventory. By August of that year, I was doing my song and dance on TikTok, right? And it was extremely well received. People really, really loved the idea of a 20-pack of CBD cigarettes that were made with full flower. Finally, that year ends, and I discover a better plant, or not a better plant, but a better cannabinoid. So CBD is like somewhere in the hemp production, right? It's not when the plant is a baby, it's when the plant is maturing already. CBD appears the same as THC and everything else. So if you go back in the growth stages, when the plant is really, really young, it produces the equivalent of stem cells, which would be CBG. CBG grows in the plant when it's young, and then they get assigned jobs, right? That CBG turns into CBD, THC, CBN, CBC, and every other cannabinoid. So you don't really get it in the end result of any plants. What we ended up doing, because we did try like the benefits of CBG, and it was night and day. For pain specifically, that's the number one thing it does. Pain and nausea, you just like, if you get enough of a dosage, you feel that impact almost instantaneously. Whereas with CBD, it's more of like a dulling factor. Oh, we'll lower the volume, but you can still hear the noise. CBG just mutes it completely. And then with stress and anxiety, it was just as good, if not slightly better than CBD. So there was no real reason for me not to switch into that, apart from the challenges of having CBG, right? I'm sure most like people that hear the term CBG don't even know that that's like a real. I mean, were you familiar with it before I brought it up?
I wasn't, only in my research of you and Qiwi, but yeah, I'm curious with CBG, like, why isn't it more common? Why have I never heard of it? But I've heard of CBD for the last 5 years. It seems like it's been the biggest fad sort of out there right now.
It doesn't matter how good CBG is if it's impossible to get, right? And that's where we were since 2018. You have the Farm Bill, all these cannabinoids are now being invested into. Because CBG only appears when the plant is a baby, your only option is to chop them all down when they're super young, and then extract the trivial amounts of CBG inside of that, which made it prohibitively expensive. I'm talking upwards of $1,300 a pound, for flour that was dense in this stuff. Finally, we worked. So when I spoke to this farmer, I understood one of my challenges was to build the entire vertical. So we worked together to secure the interest of these like genetic labs in the United States that had, through simply harnessing mutations, right? They were able to isolate certain strains that were producing CBG all the way till the end, right? And because of certain mutations, they weren't producing a trivial amount, they were producing this obscene amount of CBG, which is why, there's about 1 gram in a cigarette, and we're talking about 11%, right? Right now, the dosage per cigarette averages about 111 milligrams of CBG. Now, when you smoke that, you're getting upwards of half the dose, and you're getting instantaneously versus gummies, right? I've given gummies and oils and everything else a shot, but I need that immediate factor. I'm not going to have a panic attack and eat like 4 gummies and hope for the best in like 90 minutes or 60 minutes, right? I want to be able to step outside, take a few breaths, I walk back in, and I already feel some sort of calming like sensation, right? Right. So with those mutations, it's nobody really believed in it. A lot of people are in hemp just for the money. So it's really tough for them to justify. Listen, we can get away with selling shake and trim that has some CBD and calling it a day. And most people will like jump on that, and they can offer that at pretty low prices. If I want to use full flower and I want to use CBG and I want it to be this absolutely perfect product, how much am I going to have to charge for it? So we kind of took on the burden of, negotiating and working those prices down through volume, where we got these down to like $1 a cigarette, right? So like 20 bucks a pack, roughly. And frankly, I'm just really happy that it's been a hit, because like this is something that, again, I didn't make this to make money. I didn't make this because I saw this massive financial opportunity to take down the tobacco industry and yada, yada. Maybe it turned a little into that, right? Naturally. But I'm just really happy that like, even on this call, I have a cigarette in front of me. If I notice my heart gets a little too fluttery at some point, I can just smoke like, 2 puffs of my cigarette, and I'll have nerves of steel again. And I'll probably be a little bit more bubbly, and I'll speak slower, and everything, my head is a lot more quiet. Yeah.
Wow, that's a pretty incredible story. I want to get back into your story in a sec, but I'm curious in regards to Kiwi. Who are your direct competitors? Like, is it the CBD, THC, medical marijuana industry? Is it cigarettes? Is it vapes? Is it e-cigs? Are there specific companies that also do CBG, or what do the other companies in the industry or competitors look like?
Right. I'd say, the closest competitors, there are other CBD cigarettes on the market. However, they're just playing it a little smarter in the sense that instead of investing, instead of going so overkill on the product, I'm just going to find like a reasonable balance, right? There's no reason for me to design a Bugatti when I can design a Toyota and sell, 100 times as much. And that's kind of what you see across the board. We don't even, brand ourselves or designer, or we don't signal that, oh, we're this crazy luxury brand. Like, we're just very straightforward with it. We have extremely good flower that nobody's willing to grow. We're using the best parts of it. We're packing that into cigarettes with no real adulteration, right? And then we're calling it a day. Right. And then the price point is just, I think $1 a pre-roll should be pretty palatable for people who have, these chronic issues. Frankly, I'm getting emails with people with true like chronic pain and diseases and quality of life issues way worse than mine by factors, by orders of magnitude. And it's a shame, because they're reaching out telling me, hey, I bought your cigarettes on a whim. They've helped with like my illness or my disease or my chronic pain. Why don't you communicate this more? Why aren't you more like, vocal about this? Frankly, I'm not going to make medicinal claims, because that's one of the biggest things that can get you, in trouble. I really just go for the angle of, I know this is an FDA approved. I know, it's my goal is simply to provide access to people who were in my shoes 2 years ago. When I'm online looking for something, and I do my research on the cannabinoid and everything, and I have that confidence. Hey, maybe CBG could do something for me, and I understand that the oils and the tinctures aren't as powerful as a smokable. Is there a CBG smokable that I can potentially use and find some relief, right? Either I'm burning plant material and it's a bust and I don't buy it again, or I just found like my new favorite like companion product, right? That phone, keys, wallet, kiwis. And I know that I'm gonna be fine throughout the day, no matter what happens. So I really go for like that curiosity angle of, hey, our job is just to make the product and give you guys the opportunity to experience this, and we don't want to really set any crazy expectations of, oh, it'll fix this or it'll fix that. It'll make you like 10 times smarter, right? It's just providing the access. That's the first step. We're going through the growing pains of, e-commerce business where it's no longer, feasible for me to be doing everything from customer service all the way up to like corporate strategy. And I am learning how it goes as like a first-time CEO. But thankfully, because it's my company and because I'm this like young, idealistic guy, I'm just really optimistic that we'll be able to do something really nice for people. Like frankly, if there's anybody that can't afford the product but would love to give it a shot to see if it works and things like that, I'm always happy to just, willy-nilly give these out and give people an opportunity to sell themselves on the value, right? If it's going to work for them, they're going to try that first cigarette, they'll find the relief they want. And I'm just looking forward to the feedback of, hey, like I took a chance, it worked, I feel better. Because of your product, my quality of life has been improved.
Yeah, that's incredible to hear. I love to hear that. And it seems like your target demographic may be kind of people who have gone through the gauntlet of kind of like you did, gone through trying every different thing, starting with the really hard stuff with, things like Adderall and whatnot. That obviously isn't a long-term solution for, I don't know, probably almost anyone, into THC type things. But then those have side effects of, even if they're not technically negative side effects for a lot of people, being high all the time, that
it works for a lot of people, but it also doesn't work for a lot of people. And that's the people I want to communicate it to. I'm not trying to say that we should replace, weed with CBG cigarettes or anything like that. It's just having the opportunity to have access to it in the first place. And frankly, regarding the CBG cigarettes, you were asking me about competitors and everything else. I honestly think the competition is a fantastic thing, because this is the part that gets me the most frustrated about all of this. Why now? Like, why I'm not doing anything technologically advanced, something that nobody could have done before, right? If we were allowed to use, experiment and work with these plants for the last couple of decades, the science would be so much further than where we are now. Like, why did so many millions of people dying of cigarettes, like in the United States alone over the last couple of decades, when there was, how many of those people were smoking cigarettes because they were looking for some kind of, physical or mental relief? Or maybe they picked it up just to take the edge off, right? There was a perfectly viable product this whole time, and it was just banned. Like hemp, it has no real intoxicating factor. You're not going to get high from this, right? The only thing that could happen is that your mind and your body get clearer and feel better. And it's here it is. It's finally slowly coming up in 2022. That just boggles my mind, right? Like my assistant has her grandmother who has a bunch of different joint pains and things like that. She can't smoke. All we did was the same way you would infuse like brownies by grinding up the weed and fusing it, etc. We did the same thing with kiwis that we sliced open. We're not doing anything to them, so you can just slice a kiwi open, pop out the flour, infuse it into some oil and make things with it. We made cookies and she ate those. She wasn't intoxicated, and she was like the happiest that she's been in a while, where she's usually like a little bit, grouchy and irritated. Who wouldn't be when you're dealing with like pain 24/7? Right. So it's just extremely frustrating that it took this long for us to get the opportunity to have a product like this Any competition just means that the industry is getting bigger, that there's more people who are finding the relief that they wanted, you know, and there's still so many restrictions on the marketing and on what you can show, like on the internet, et cetera. They made it really, really difficult to get this product out there. So I'm really just hoping that like people wake up to the power of not just CBG, not just kiwis, but like the cannabinoids in that plant. You have trouble sleeping, go find a CBN product, right? Try that, and you will feel the body lock, the couch lock effect of cannabis without the high. You're still going to get your REM sleep, and you're going to feel great, right? CBD products for other people, CBC products for other people. Point is, there are way more cannabinoids than CBG, but nobody knows about them. Nobody even knows about CBG and CBD because of these restrictions, because it's so expensive to do right by people. You see them always like cutting costs and lowering the doses and things. What's the stigma behind CBD? It doesn't work. Oh, I tried one of those gummies, didn't feel anything. I tried the oil before bed, didn't feel anything. It has a bad reputation because none of the offerings have been able to, go really heavy with the value. You smoke 130 milligrams of CBD, you're getting over half that dose in your bloodstream like that, you are going to feel substantial like downshift, right? And that's what people are probably seeking when they're doing like their miniature oils in the first place.
Yeah, it seems like an industry that's just ripe to sort of take things over. It kind of makes you wonder if with, the cigarette and the taxation capabilities on that, if there's a lot being involved from that end on the governmental side of things that, they don't necessarily want all of these things coming out because they are viable options that don't have the negative effects. It seems like they pretty much just have upside and very little downside, and they are plants. Not that all natural plants are, of always amazing for you, but right. I would take that over.
And smoking anything, right? Like it's not me saying that smoking is good for you. No, it's that most people are drinking. Most people are smoking cannabis anyways. Most people are smoking cigarettes anyway. If you could look at all the possible vices and you found a vice with the absolute least amount of consequences, you're still inhaling burning plant smoke. It's still like an irritant. Don't go too crazy because you can irritate your lungs over time. But at the end of the day, pick your poison, right? And if you pick a poison with very little consequence, but all this potential therapeutic value, right? I'm sure if you could drink something that had like 10% the impact on your body of alcohol, but then didn't make you drunk, and it had all these other wonderful qualities, you'd think that's some sort of miracle product, right? So it's at the end of the day, it's just really frustrating, right? I don't know what else to say on that front.
Yeah. It's like everyone has their vices in some degree. Like very little people on earth have zero vices. So at the end of the day, it is like, pick your poison, figure it out. And it's interesting how our society is sort of settled on these sorts of vices, and just because they're legal, there isn't the stigma. But in my mind, like alcohol, I still drink and, go out with my friends and get drunk here and there. But like alcohol is one of the worst drugs on the face of this earth.
Absolutely.
And Adderall as well, and Vyvanse, and all of those are extremely harmful to people. It's essentially, it's a meth.
And how do we justify it, right? Oh, the ends justify the means. It is better for this person to improve their academic or their professional performance, but like slowly, deal with the consequences of taking amphetamines on a regular schedule, right? And then here we have like something that has actual therapeutic value, and it's like every single block possible exists. There's a reason that the industry hasn't blown up, and it's because there's so many restrictions that we face that all these other, vices and products aren't really like viable to.
Yeah, for sure. A question I had, I was curious, we haven't gotten to this drug yet, but psychedelics, if you have any experience with those at all when it comes to mental health and whatnot. My only experience is in mushrooms. I haven't tried LSD or DMT or any of those things, but I'm curious if you have any experience or thoughts on any of those, just given that you're sort of in the realm of these
Right,
types
right.
of products in a lesser degree?
My feelings on these cannabinoids and this flower are very similar to my feelings on most psychedelics and things like that, where it's just a matter of time before we start like understanding that these, even if you want to consider them vices, go ahead. But the point is, if we're able to justify amphetamines and things like that, for for improving your quality of life, why not psychedelics and other drugs like that that have shown, very a lot of potential, and we can leave it at that, right? Specifically with my own personal drug usage, when I was younger, it was an angle of I wanted to when I was a little kid, right? I was interested in two things: space and magic. I never grew out of the space, but I almost grew out of the magic. Under magic, there was alchemy. But once I got older, I realized pharmaceuticals and substances and anything that can really alter your state of consciousness or have an effect like that, it's pretty much the most intimate type of alchemy you have. If we talk about things like DMT, right? You get this root powder, you extract this specific chemical from it, and then you smoke it in a vapor genie or whatever, and it has the power within 15 minutes to totally blow your sense of self and reality. It kills your ego. You are this blank. You are nothing but awareness. You're not even attached to your identity anymore. Most people never experience what that's like. Most people, all their sense of being grounded is having their identity, having their everything in its place. They've never really shaken that up and seen how they feel on the other end of that, right? Me personally, it's when I was younger, I did try a couple things recreationally. Psychedelics were something that I never would touch recreationally, right? It was always something like very profound for me. Psilocybin has been a big part of like my healing journey, where it's like every year, it's like I would set aside time for one very deep trip. I was inspired when I saw Joe Rogan's podcast with Paul Stamets, right? The number one mycologist in the United States. And he was talking about how he was able to cure his stutter as a happy coincidence, as a happy consequence of stuffing his mouth with like a really high dosage of shrooms, climbing a tree in the forest and being in the middle of this crazy thunderstorm and having this extremely profound experience that he came home from, and his stutter was completely gone. He was speaking to his neighbors in like a voice he had never had before. For me, it's always the same ritual, right? It's I get in the bathtub after a day of prep, right? I'm fasting, I'm eating clean foods. If I do eat foods, I meditate like the whole like evening on a Friday, and I wake up and I make sure there's no real outside stimuli to mess with me, right? I set up the bath. I put on the John Hopkins playlist for psilocybin therapy, which is like this playlist that it starts off very light. You have this like very very mellow guitar. It's like Vivaldi. Then it progresses into like these really emotional compositions. Like imagine this just these massive like crescendos where it's like the end of Titanic or the end of Requiem for a Dream. It's just pulling at every heartstring you have. And then it's going into different emotions, and you're going through the entire like spectrum, and then you're coming down at the end of the experience, and it's, what a wonderful world, right? And that's what you're like opening your eyes to. I personally set the water temperature in my bath to the temperature of my skin. I put a little bit of Epsom salts in there. I blindfold myself. I put on my headphones. So the only thing I'm experiencing is all internal stimuli, no external stimuli. And I just, and I start meditating, and it's always, my mind like expects it now, where it primes itself because it's the same music every time. I start off with my Vivaldi, and I'm like, oh, like, here we go, after I lose track of time, I'm not even paying attention to the music. I'm not paying attention to anything. I'm living deep, deep experiences in my mind that are they're almost like simulations meant to help you over certain humps, right? Like, and I'm very comfortable talking about all of this specifically because, it's just stuff that I accepted has really helped me, and I really hope it can help others. Right. When I was 16, I was in Canada and I had a really hard life, and I was in foster care, and, things were really rough for me. And I went, well, if I go into this story, I'm going to take you down a completely different path. It's quite a chunky story. Specifically, just to answer your question on the substances, I'm a big believer in the power of all psychedelics. I think they can all be used in different ways. Even things like ketamine, right? There's a lot of people skeptical about psychedelics, but you see, like, in the mainstream culture, ketamine is taking like a more mainstream place before psilocybin. At least from what I'm seeing and hearing, like, online and stuff, you see ads regularly for ketamine clinics and things like that. And you're seeing all these studies pop up on the news and on Reddit of ketamine's potential for antidepressing effects. But I'm a strong believer that will be replaced by psilocybin or MDMA or something. I can't see a veteran who dealt with something very harsh, overseas, and has, all these scars on their body and their mind, go and take, ketamine and come out better than if they would have taken these other substances that are a little bit more almost empathetic, right, to the experience. I know there's a lot of cases of veterans who, like, take MDMA in like a clinical setting, and they're blindfolded, and they're just internalizing that experience, and they're reliving it over and over and over. But the substance is really ramping up the empathetic parts of the brain. At least that's what I've understood as, like, a layman, right? And they come out of that going, hey, I relived that horrible moment that had been such a crutch my whole life, and I was able to get over the hump by, like, realizing, coming to terms with it somehow through perspective, right? Just like one big shift of perspective over time, and they walk out going, that, I'm not triggered by the same things I used to be. I'm ready to go now.
Yeah, certainly. I think a lot of those experiences come back to a sense of clarity and being able to see things from a sort of clearer, more objective perspective. And I've had my fair share of trips and experiences like that. And it seems like every single time I come out of it with a little bit of a shift in perspective. And the interesting part when I talk to people about it, because I'm very open about it too. I make YouTube videos and TikToks, just like being very open about specifically my experiences with psilocybin and mushrooms and whatnot. And because there's such a big stigma against them, that they are this, like, trippy, psychedelic, illegal, Schedule 1 drug that, if you get caught with
Right.
it, you're going to jail, which is incredible to me. But I try and be open about it because I see the benefits. I've seen them in my own life, and I see how they could potentially benefit others. And it's not even that I'm promoting, taking a 5-gram heroic dose. It's just even mixing in some microdoses here and there, just to get a little bit of that calming effect, realize that your mind doesn't have to be as noisy as it is all the time. There is a type of life you can live without that, and these substances can help get you there. But with your experiences, have you had, because with mine, I've taken, sometimes I close my eyes with them and it's very much an internal kind of, like, feel like I'm going deep within myself. And then sometimes I'm just going about my day, even walking around New York City, and I'm able to sort of realize things just from things that I notice, and have some sort of, like, perspective shift just on seeing an interaction or hearing someone talk about something, and realize how egotistical we can be, or it reminds me of something that I said, and I'm able to sort of, like, work through a past situation within a single trip. Have you had some specific perspective shifts from your trips that you've been able to, utilize, or is it just more of a clarity coming out of it and seeing things for what they are without that sort of identity that you've built up your entire life?
Right, right. And it's interesting how you phrase that, because both are applicable. Now I can't really recall a time where I've taken psilocybin in any context where I'm not all by myself inside my apartment, with in like a completely blacked out bathroom, right? The only time where I'm not in there is towards the end of the trip, where I'm coming out and I'm still coming down, and I get to enjoy myself a bit, and I listen to music and I eat fruits, and I just jam out for the come down. For me, I've always been very cautious about doing these substances anywhere outside like my safe space, just because when I'm on these substances, I like, specifically psilocybin, I like doing large doses to really try and get as deep as possible. And you can internalize very few things, that you can take very few things with you. So I take thoughts like, you are home, you are safe, you're on a drug that's also pretty safe, and you're gonna come out of this in just a few hours. Enjoy the ride. That's all I need to hold on to. I don't have to remember my name. I don't have to remember who I am. I don't need to remember anything about myself or my identity or my like if it's relevant, it will bubble up and we'll deal with it there. But I like having this massive blank space to work with, and I feel like if I did that in a different context, there's always the potential for that stimulus to pull me in one direction or the other, right? Like, you hear a noise and suddenly your brain's focusing on whatever that noise is, where you have no idea what path you could have gone down if you would have just kept pulling on the same thread instead of switching to a new one. And it's fascinating, because the people that they ask me about it, I don't actively promote its usage. I simply like to share my stories, especially with the cynical people. But I feel like I approach it from such a grounded perspective where, hey, I've had very similar concerns. This is how I address them. This is how I justify, how you rationalize its usage. How do I not feel irresponsible taking, an illegal substance and this and that? And, after I'm able to communicate a bit like what my angle is on these things, they usually get interested and they usually seek it out themselves. And I usually, there's been many instances of, hey, I, was in this crazy car crash. I couldn't drive for years. I had a psilocybin trip and I was driving the next day, right? Things like that, where it gave them their life back, because it was just the thought that, your mind was so good at stopping you from getting there, you could never get there, even if it was to address it. The psilocybin gives you almost that power to dig through that, right? That thought becomes so apparent because it's really pushing you into it until you can't avoid it. And it's like, yeah, you have to deal with it. And once you do, it's like this massive knots like undone in your brain. I don't know if you could relate to this experience, but one big thing for me was I've repressed so many memories growing up. And every single time I deal with one of those big blockages, like massive emotional blockage, emotions I never wanted to feel again, I deal with that, and I almost unlock an entire chapter of my memories that were just all associated to that. All those memories I could not touch because they would eventually lead to the bad memory, right? Oh, girl like called you fat, called you chubby, and it was a girl you liked, and it was fourth grade. You don't remember third or fourth or fifth grade because it was all in the same school. And then you deal with that memory and you realize all these memories of your childhood that you wouldn't recall normally. I've had that experience back to back to back, like where I am still trying to piece together like my full story. I know my story on the surface, but the memories of it, they're like all over the place. And psilocybin has given me the ability to start remembering things that I couldn't remember for the last 10, 15 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I certainly resonate with that. I had a situation in high school that led me to be very just afraid of public speaking mainly for a while, throughout most of college. It was my senior year of high school, and I was always, fairly quiet, and I was kind of like overcoming social anxiety just sort of naturally, but I was still pretty quiet overall and just had a lot of internal dialogue, and just was never very present, or never felt very present, always worried about the future. And I had a situation where I was in history class, and there was another class of like another 20, 25 people in it. And we did this debate, and I prepared for the debate and was feeling good, like no nerves whatsoever really for it. I had never really gotten super nervous for any sort of public speaking to that degree before then. And then it turned out that I prepared, I forget exactly how it went, but I prepared for like the rebuttal side of things. And I thought there was like a miscommunication, that I thought I was only on the rebuttal side. And then I had to give like the opening sort of statement. And I just like completely froze, and I couldn't come up with anything. And I started like kind of trying to make my rebuttal into like an opening statement. And there were kids on the other team like talking shit and just being like, dude, this isn't the rebuttal. This isn't the rebuttal. And I just like completely froze. I was paralyzed. I was afraid. It was all these emotions. And it was, I think, probably like 4 or 5 years after that I came across this meditation on YouTube that basically kind of like took you into your subconscious. It's like a 40-minute meditation, and had you sort of relive the experience and go through and feel and name all of the emotions that you felt in that experience. So it was like fear, frozenness, like embarrassment, worry, like anger, fright, fear, all of that shit. And then so it takes you through that. It has you feel all those things. And then it goes through this segment that it's basically like, tell yourself that it's okay to feel each and every one of those things. Like there is nothing wrong with any of those feelings, because it comes back. It's not the situation that you hate so much, it's the feelings that went along with that situation that you are afraid of. So you're afraid of being frozen. You're afraid of being afraid, more or less. And so when I was able to go through and kind of fully accept those and say, hey, this is okay that I felt these things. There's nothing wrong with any of these feelings whatsoever. They are just feelings. They are just objective sorts of feelings that I was feeling in that moment. And it is okay. I was able to basically, kind of like you were saying, like go back and release all of those feelings. And it kind of got better. Like that was something that every time I had to speak publicly in any way whatsoever, even in a situation like on a podcast or something, I would think of that situation and how horrible it was and how I didn't want to feel that. So I was afraid of that happening again. And after that, I was sort of, that part of me, I was able to let go of, and it stopped coming up every single time. And now, even if it does, like this is the first time I've thought about it in probably the last year or two at least. And there's no sort of semblance of worry that comes along with it, because I know that there's nothing wrong with feeling any of those things. So even if they were to trickle up a little bit, I just accept them, and there's nothing wrong with it. And so, yeah, I definitely resonate with that sort of traumatic, individual traumatic experience that just stays with you for a while. Even though that may not seem to some people like this crazy thing, it stayed with me for a while.
Yep. And specifically with this happened to me on LSD, actually, which, I like to call it like, shrooms are kind of like you are on rails, right? You're like in a little mine cart, and you're pulling away, and you're just going along like a predetermined path. Whereas with LSD, it's very cold, and it's just, okay, fine, we'll let you into your brain, but we're not going to hold your hand. We're just going to map the whole thing, and you're going to end up wherever you end up. Horrible trip, blissful trip. Like, it's up to you. Figure it out. Like, you really do feel like, there's no guidance whatsoever. On LSD specifically, let me see, because I'm losing my train of thought here. It was the perspective shift specifically I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, like the sort of acceptance of the situation and the feelings.
It was I didn't understand how impactful, how like there are all these micro expressions that go into your everyday thought pattern, right? From those events. I took LSD this one time, and it was supposed to be for a therapeutic purpose. I was giving it a shot. I had a regime, and I just remember my thought process was I still hadn't gotten to the point where I was going to use the blindfold and everything. I was in my bedroom. My lights are changing. You know, I made myself a comfortable space. And I just remembered that I kept like having this scary like memory, a memory I didn't want to think about. I didn't want to feel it pop up, and my mind would black out, right? So I would try to think about anything else. And I remember trying to be clever, right? I remember trying to think about things that would make me feel smarter. I don't know why I got in that loop, but I did, right? I felt insecure about my intelligence. So I tried to like think of ways to prove to myself that I wasn't dumb. And I would just black out like that thought process, right? I would just, I'd go down that path. I'd start getting the answer I want, and then just like complete blackness. And I started meditating on that. And what I saw were like my thoughts, basically the events, the loop that I was in. I saw it from the outside now, right? I went through that loop. I had experienced it. Now I'm meditating and I'm wondering what was happening there, right? And it's almost happening on the side as well. Like I'm feeling the emotions, but I'm in a very observant state. And it felt like someone was rolling out a roll of film, and I could see every individual like pivot in my thought process as a frame. And there was this one connection to a spelling bee, when I was in fourth grade. I was a brilliant like speller, right? I was fantastic at it. And I was doing a spelling bee and I choked at the end of it. I was one of the last two kids or three kids, and they gave me Gladiator, Glad. Well, I'm not going to mess it up on the podcast, but I remember Gladiator. It was trivial to me. Like I knew that like the back of my hand. And I think I swapped like two letters. I failed. I went back to my classroom. Everybody started laughing because the teacher's like, "Did you win?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I didn't." And like they made fun of me for having to leave for a spelling bee. When I came back, "Oh, he didn't even win. Ha ha." You know? Right. And that experience, so what was happening is, oh, let me prove to myself that I'm not dumb. And I start thinking about like my intellectual accomplishments. And as soon as I start getting to the point where it's like 99% there, I'm about to successfully reassure myself that I am, you know, clever. Boom, that memory would pop up. My brain would immediately like, we're not going to do that right now. We're not going to think about that. Completely cuts it off. And then it's just black, 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 black for each successive frame where I'm there like, I don't know what I was talking about. I literally can't recall where the hell my thoughts were like 5 seconds ago, right? And it helped me get through that, because once I knew what was causing, I would see that slide pop up. I would see the black that came afterwards, and I really dove into that slide, and I just meditated on that slide, and I really relived that memory where I was piecing it together, how it happened. I remembered the specific typo, and I remember telling myself there, "You knew how to spell the damn word. You were just nervous. You were just on the spot. You were like in the last 3 rounds. You got a little too confident." And boom, there it was. I told myself you got a little too confident, and I realized why I avoided confidence so aggressively, right? Like I always had to be paranoid. That's how I felt comfortable. Confidence wasn't a matter of, oh, I want to look like I'm moving through life with confidence. Confidence to me was, I want to be able to do things on the first go. I want to be able to tap into my gut instinct, right? I want to be able to feel and do instead of feel and calculate and psych myself out and not do it in the first place. It was all because the few moments where I've had that kind of confidence are tied to that, right? It goes sour. Oh, you see what happens? If you would have been paranoid, if you would have been anxious, you would have gotten the answer right. But because you thought you had it in the bag, because you were confident and cocky about it, you messed it up. That's a life lesson for you. Don't be confident, because it will always go wrong. And I had to like unwind that thought pattern. And by the end of the trip, I can't say it was fixed. What I can say is that I had direction, right? Every time I was lacking confidence, or every time I was able to quickly rationalize how to psych myself out of doing something I was fearful of doing, I would tap into that specific memory and realize I knew the damn answer the whole time. And it wasn't a matter of like confidence. It was a matter of just like mistakes happen, right? However, at the same time, me growing up as like a video game kid, it like terrifies me that in life we don't have respawns, we don't have like second chances, really. Like, if I get cocky while I'm driving and I'm not paying attention, that could be a very expensive like scratch, or it could be life or death, right? So I still carry like that was like the origin story of like the rational side of my anxiety, where I'm always thinking the less you kind of do, the less risk there is. And it's still something that I work on personally. But that's why I appreciate so much what you're doing in regards to kind of just helping people really see the variety of perspectives there are. Negative visualization, that is like my bread and butter to like getting myself to do something. But it shouldn't be that way. I should be able to do something in kind of like a harmonious way with myself, where it's like, come on, pal, like we're gonna do it. I know you're scared, but like there isn't really much to fear. Just go ahead and do it. It's and then tying it back to psychedelics, this is a story that I share often because I really like painting a picture of, guys, we're still not like completely clear on how the mind works, or how consciousness works, or how the brain itself as an organ works, right? So if you hear these stories, maybe I am an unreliable narrator. Maybe it isn't like perfect to how it actually went down, but the point being, like, that is an experience that was true to me and I internalized. And if you do go down that path and you do have these experiences, because you resonated with the story, who knows, like how it could benefit you in a way. I know there's some older gentlemen in my life that have given it a shot afterwards, and they've tapped into memories that they've had. They're like 70 plus now, and they're tapping into memories of themselves like as teenage kids riding around bikes in their neighborhood, like memories that they couldn't like recall. They didn't remember those phases of their life. They were only focused on like the last 10 or 20 years. And they're like, Josh, like, I remember being a kid. I remember like things that happened to me when I was 11 are affecting me now at 70 years old. Right?
Yeah, certainly.
I got really wound up there.
No, yeah, that's an incredible story. You touched on a lot there. And I think, our past is something that many people cling to determine their idea of themselves. And I actually made a video last night, kind of funny, the timing, where it was like, I was actually sitting right here just filming it. And it was like an interview between me and my higher self, which at the end, the video cuts and it's like the seat's empty where the higher self was sitting. And it's like, there is no higher self. Like, you are your higher self right now. But it basically is, getting interviewed by your higher self, or my higher self. And it asks, hey, so Andrew, tell me about yourself. Who are you? And so I start going through, I'm from Minneapolis, went to Penn, blah, blah, blah. And then it cuts me off real quick. It's like, whoa, I didn't ask about your past. I asked who you are. And like, oh, okay. It's like, because are you your past, or are you right now? Because you can't be both. And so then there's a couple more lines, but it's basically the idea that, you're not your past. You're not like the idea of who you are. The idea of Andrew or of Josh is everything leading up to this moment. Like, how you define yourself is basically someone asks you, say, for example, in an interview, you just start ripping through your past and all of your accomplishments, experiences, where you went to school, all of that stuff. But you aren't the past, and the past isn't right now. So while it may have led you to this moment, it doesn't define you. And I think when people are able to get over the idea that they are their past, like that they're not their past and they're just right now, I think that is when they kind of settle into this space, which is uncertainty to the greatest degree right now, and anything beyond this moment is completely uncertain. So it's common, I think, to cling to the past as a sense of certainty of knowing who you are. But I think there's a point where we as humans can sort of transcend this idea of clinging to this false sense of security or certainty and realize that right now we don't know, and we are sort of in this infinite realm of potential, of possibilities. And rather than, when we don't have that baggage of the past or this idea of who we are, this idea of Andrew, like yes, I am sort of this human body, but the idea of Andrew is a very strong idea and concept and perception that everyone has a different perception of Andrew, including myself. So when I'm able to go beyond this idea of myself and who I think I am and all of these things I've used to define myself, which not only comes with, the confident sort of egotistical kind of confidence and like, oh,
Right.
I've done this really well in the past, I can cling to that. The same exact mentality clings to the fear and the suffering and the things I think I'm not good at. So an example just of that happening and sort of manifesting in my life is right before I started posting content. My boss at work had us record a client call. And I always had this idea of myself as not being super confident on calls, not being able to answer questions super well, just not being very well spoken in calls like that. And I recorded it and I listened to it back and I was like, oh yeah, like it probably went okay. But there were different points where I took a while to respond to a question and I thought these things. And then I listened to it back and I did like way better than I thought listening to it back. And all of those times that I thought I paused for what felt like 5 seconds was like a split second pause that wasn't even noticeable. And it was literally that point. Like, I didn't like that boss very much, but she basically doing that was the switch I needed to start posting content. Because another part was like, I didn't really like my voice or listening to myself talk. A lot of people I think don't really like their own voice when they hear it, but I had that going as well. So as soon as I listened to that back, I was like, oh, my voice isn't as weird as I thought. Like I am actually pretty good at articulating these things. That was the final thing that I needed to overcome to start making content. I literally started like a few days after that. And so it was like this idea that I had that I realized wasn't true. And just from, it's not even that I questioned it. It was just that I was able to sort of see that perspective from a third person perspective. I was like, oh, wow, all of these things I had in my head aren't actually true at all.
Right. And I mean, you can even extrapolate that and spread it out to most people who have like this lack of self-esteem and confidence. But then the rest of the world's looking at these people going like, I would never be able to tell. Like, you come across like very confident in yourself. You look like, you know what you're doing. I would never have known that you had all these thoughts in your head. Whereas the person on the other side is just like perpetually bombarded by like all these reasons to be psyched out and nervous. Even on this podcast, like, mentally, I'm like calm. I feel good, especially after a couple CBD cigarettes, right? But it's if we were on this call just 1 year ago, right, same day and everything, I would be here telling myself, oh, like, you don't speak like the average person. You're stuttering a little bit, and your voice like cycles too much between high and low, and it's not consistent, and you don't sound very confident or professional, and just rapping it all out, when in reality I'd probably have the same performance. And even now it's I don't have those doubts in my head. It's just what that voice would kind of pin on you, right? And it's just a matter of kind of actively just giving yourself a chance to, express and observe, right? Because at the end of this day, I can kind of just sense the tempo between us, and there's no real like disconnect, right? But last year, I would have been imagining that disconnect. I would have been here going, oh, this guy's talking to me. He thinks that I'm a sloppy speaker, or, I'm speaking too fast for my own good, or yada, yada, yada. And just like this would be like a grueling like task, Right. So it really does come down to perspective, like 100%. I hear you.
Yeah. And it's like getting that idea of yourself out of the way. And when it comes down to it, like the idea of ourself doesn't actually exist in the moment. Like right now, I made a video about this recently, but it's like right now I am speaking. Like it's not that I am Andrew that is speaking. I am the act of speaking itself.
Right.
Like the act of speaking cannot happen without me. So there's no me involved in that action. Like we are the action that in which we are doing. Like we are speaking on a podcast. Like the act of
Right.
speaking on a podcast is what we are in this moment. So without that perception of yourself in conversations or in interactions, there isn't that internal dialogue sort of holding you back from all of your potential, because all that is say you have 100% potential if there is zero sense of self in the act of doing. And I like to consider that sort of like what people call flow state, is when there's zero identity, you are just sort of one with that which you are doing, versus if you start having thoughts about how you're doing in the conversation, what the other person thinks of you in the conversation, all of these different internal thoughts about this idea of yourself, all of a sudden, say that takes away 20% of your potential in the moment of doing it. So it's kind of a spectrum. I'm trying to figure out a way to make a video out of it, but it's like a spectrum of fear and flow. And fear is like full concrete sense of self and identity, whereas flow is like zero sense of self and identity, and you're just one with the action which you are doing, because nerves stem typically from how the idea of yourself is going to do within the action versus just being one with that action. Whereas the flow state is there is no fear involved in that sort of state.
Right.
It's just that it's without that sense of self. You are just one with that which you are doing. And I think that is sort of, people talk about, gratitude or optimism being the peak of how we exist. But I think of those things as, you still have to rely on thought and the idea of yourself to be grateful for something.
And those are
specific.
still tricky. And those
Exactly.
are still tricky, right?
Yeah.
What is gratitude if not appreciating something that now you have a reason to fear losing in the first place, right? It's like you don't want to want because you don't want to miss out, like in the same way.
Yeah. Gratitude and fear are more or less one and the same. And it's a realization I had recently, because I used to be very big into, going through sort of gratitude and positivity affirmations every single morning. And while I don't think, there's nothing wrong with that, the only thing is it still reinforces that sense of identity that just as equally you can be afraid of. And that sense of identity is the root of your suffering. Without that sense of identity, what do people have to fear or worry about? Really, that's kind of the primary thing that anyone ever worries about. And it's a new sort of realization for me that those two things, gratitude and fear, like optimism and worry, are sort of two sides of the same coin, or a double-edged sword in that way. So it's more being more in the mindset of that sort of flow state and just lack of identity, and continuing to question that sense of self, I think is sort of where I'm at these days.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And specifically, I just remembered when I tried gratitude, the voice in my mind would always, it was really clever, just warping everything into a very perverted version of what it meant. So if I'm thinking about gratitude, it's like, well, let's start with a more basic one, right? Like affirmations. I try to look at myself in the mirror and I try to affirm certain things. And the voice in my head would be telling me, oh, if you need the affirmations in the first place, you're not that. All right. If you need to tell yourself you're smart, you're not smart. If you need to tell yourself that you're confident, you're not confident. And it would just psych yourself out. Gratitude, I try to be grateful about something. I'm grateful for the most, integral of things, so like my health. Okay, what are you going to do the day you wake up and you can't write that down anymore because you don't have it, right? Like, how are you going to rewrite that? Like, oh, well, that might be when I'm older. Oh, well, it might happen to you younger, or you have no idea what could happen to you in the next 5 years, right? And it's just every single thing you try to do to kind of get a grip on your identity and feel better about it could always be used against itself. So what you're saying about how, yeah, it might be beneficial in the short term, but once you keep on that path, it's not depending on identity, to give you direction, basically, right? I think it was the CIA that had put out this thing saying, if you wanna, if you wanna destroy someone's like confidence and like complete, what was it? If you really want to be able to manipulate somebody, you go after their sense of identity. Because once that's compromised, they have nothing, they are on shaky ground, right? They could go in any direction once they're not attached to their identity. And that's like a rule of thumb for like that philosophy, because almost everybody is going to be that attached to their identity. There are very few individuals that are able to kind of create a little bit of space, right? And live within that space comfortably. And sure, you can dip back and forth as needed, right? It's like the people that they are on a path to enlightenment, they shed their ego, but then they're having such a hard time functioning in society. And then over time, maybe there's a thought of, oh, maybe it's about being in balance with the ego, right? Not getting rid of it completely, because maybe you do need an ego to survive in like your standard day-to-day life, but understanding that the ego is the ego and creating that space. And it's not you, right? It's not, it kills a lot of the fear associated with like damaging or bruising the ego. When you realize it's just a separate abstract concept, you feel a lot better about doing things that, I'm not going to take that personal, because that's just like an ego burn, right? I'm just gonna, what would I do if that didn't hurt me? Oh, I'd probably keep on driving and not like engage, and then flick this guy off in traffic or drive really close to him or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. I think I actually have another podcast that I do weekly called Dualistic Unity. I think you would actually really enjoy it, because this is the type of stuff we talk about all the time.
I was watching the first episode on YouTube.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. It's fascinating talking just to someone else about this idea of identity and just how clearly you sort of grasp these concepts. Because as with even something like ego, it's funny, we kind of on that podcast make jokes about people who say like, I killed my ego, like I had an ego death, because right, just your sense of your sense of me is your ego. Like there's nothing right, wrong with it. So saying like my ego is dead is, you're saying you have an ego while saying that it's dead at the same time. So, it's not about killing your ego. It's about realizing that you're not it. And just like you said, creating that sort of space where you're able to sort of see it from a third party perspective and not necessarily identify with it. Like I don't really, like, quite frankly, there are times where I sort of forget that I am Andrew, but it's not that I have a ego death or whatever. Maybe it's like happens for a few minutes here and there in certain ways, but it's you're still able to use that identity to function, and you need an ego in order to function in this dualistic,
it's the attachment illusion to the ego that's the catch, right? If you get rid of that dependence on the ego for your day-to-day life, you use it as needed, it becomes a tool instead of like a burden that you have to carry with you and protect with your life. Oh, this guy like offended my pride. I have these really strong emotions and I have to lash out, blacking out the consequences. I'll deal with those later. What would happen if your ego was a tool? You realize that maybe like there is like a peaceful outcome to the resolution. If there isn't a peaceful outcome, but there is an exit, right? Maybe you just take the exit. It's not worth it, right? I always like to think about the ripple effects of my actions as well, right? So like in the past, I would be that guy who got like every little thing would kind of like bruise me. Oh, who does this guy think he is, cutting me off in traffic or doing this or that to me? Now I'm the kind of guy who like almost I can never really find a reason to lay on my horn, right? Because I have no, like me honking the horn is going to do nothing to speed this person up. They're still going to move whenever they move. It might just be in a few more seconds. I have the patience for that. And who knows, maybe if I honk the horn, I anger this guy, maybe he acts out against me and takes it really personal and, tailgates me or whatever else. or maybe he takes that home with him and it affects like his relationship with his family, or his, maybe he's going to work and he's going to lash out at somebody superior or inferior or whatever it might be on the hierarchy. And it's like not worth it when it's like you zoom out, you see all the conflict in the world, and it's really just if we didn't live in such a scarcity based mindset, if we could have enough for everybody and all of us could feel safety and things like that, it would be wonderful. But it only takes one bad seed to start that. It's a calm pond, and that one bad reaction is a fat rock that lands and starts affecting the people around it. Your one bad action could piss off like one person. That one person pisses off three people. Those three people like continue to spread. Oh, I was offended today, so now I'm in a bad mood. Anybody I encounter today is gonna not get like my best, right? And then the next person adopts the exact same mentality, and it's infectious. Whereas, growing up, I see all the bad in the world, and I'm thinking, oh, like fight fire with fire. Like you have to come out guns blazing. You have to systematically attack the root causes of like evil in the world or this and that. You grow up and you realize like you cut off the head of a snake, it's just going to grow another head, right? Like it's you can't really beat fire with fire in this instance. It's just a matter of people like feeling comfortable enough in the world to be nice. What happens to the person who is this cutthroat asshole? Like you meet him and you're like, wow, this guy has no empathy, no regard for anybody but himself. And then you kind of dig into that. You meet this guy, you have a lunch, and maybe you realize that this all started because he was nice to somebody and they screwed him over. And maybe he gave it 10 chances. Maybe he gave it 100 chances from being a teenager to being an adult, and he always had people's best interests at heart, and it never worked out, and he would consistently get screwed. And eventually it flicked the switch and he became that toxic guy. But what he's not realizing, maybe because he doesn't care at this point, is that he is like that same character development for somebody else, right? Maybe you have someone under you at your job who's like really kind, really well-meaning, and you're tearing him apart because you see the old you in him, right? You're giving him that criticism, and boom, 10 years later, that guy is you. That guy is this bitter, cutthroat guy, just continuing the chain. The same way we talk about like generational curses, like in our families and stuff, and oh, we're gonna break the curse, right? Is the same way like we should see our interactions with like anybody, basically, because they all have like that impact. They're all experiences that people integrate and then make a decision on, well, how should I continue being? Am I going to still be this nice guy if I just got burnt in this way? And maybe it's the 100th time I get burned this way. Enough is enough. Maybe I'm going to be a bad guy.
Yeah. It comes back to that idea, which I got caught up a few months ago. Just like I was in a pretty happy place in my life, and then I got caught up in this thought pattern of just like, how can I be happy when there's so much suffering in the world? Like, how do I reconcile with that idea? And I've sort of come to terms with it and realized that it just comes down to being that change you want to see in the world. And me not being happy because of suffering is only adding additional unhappiness to the world. And each one of us individually is the world, more or less. Like we are the world manifest. So as we change, so does the world. And that's where that ripple effect sort of comes in. So coming to terms with the fact that you can change yourself a lot more than you think, but you can't change the world outside of you probably as much as you hope. So through at least forced change, whereas being that sort of change that you want to see, allowing for those ripples to kind of get sent out, because as much as a bad egg getting dropped in the pond creates a ton of ripples, so does a good egg getting dropped and doing good in the world, and just speaking about these things and promoting this sort of mentality of life will reach and have impact on far more people than you can probably imagine. Even just doing it throughout your day, even if you're not, on social media and whatnot, it's just from day-to-day interactions, just smiling at someone on the street. If they are having a shitty day and they see that there's some semblance of hope in the world, maybe they will do that as well. Maybe someone else saw the interaction and it just expands exponentially, and you have no idea how that will necessarily impact things, but it's far more powerful than I think we give it credit for.
And that's my favorite thing you've said thus far, just because that's something that I'm really big on staring into the abyss, right? And trying to find out where the bottom of the abyss is. There's like a lot of bad stuff going on 24/7. And if you look for worse stuff, you'll always find it, right? And when you think you've hit the limit, there's always more. There's always more. For me, my first big the first big hump I was able to go over was to understand that for as much like evil and bad and whatever as there is, there should be like just as much in the opposite direction. Maybe it's not in balance, maybe it's not in flux, but there's certainly a massive, a substantial amount of good that you're just not paying attention to. You don't focus on the light. If you don't solely focus on the darkness, that's all you're going to know. It's like with depression, right? With depression, it feels like it eats away at your happy memories because you go so long without tapping into that feeling, you start almost forgetting or weakening the connection to memories associated with that feeling. When all you know is boredom or apathy or just like this, like the feelings of depression, that's going to be what's like easy to access in your mind. And those happy memories are really, really deep in there. And maybe you can't reach them anymore. And then it's cool because we can circle back to psychedelics, kind of forcing your brain, giving it a shot at tapping into those happy memories or the melancholy memories or just whatever it could be, reminding you how it felt, right? Though, and with psychedelics, it's you really do feel like you're experiencing it. From an outside, it's like, oh, this person is having a dream about their memories, like inside, right? But none of that's actually happening. But as far as you're concerned, what is reality if not just like light that you're piping in through your peripherals and then sending it to your brain and like making up that image? That process is happening in your brain with the psychedelics. You're truly, truly immersed in the experience. And it is an experience. Like you come out of that feeling the emotions and whatever else like you were supposed to feel in that period. It's
yeah, dude, it's fascinating just how, because reality is how we perceive it. It's what our brain is telling us that it is, even from what we see. Like everything in front of us, both of us right now, is mostly empty space. It's just signals getting sent to our brain. So of course, how we perceive things and our perspective on things and how we internally see the world is going to connect with what's actually being reflected back. So how you see yourself is how you see the world, and how you see the world is dependent on every single individual person. So our perceptions play not only a massive role, but basically the entire role of that, because all it's doing, as you said, is reflecting light back into our processing capabilities. So our mind is having just as much of an impact on those things as all of our senses, our sight, our sense of smell, sound, taste, feel, all of those things. It's all kind of coming together in there. So I think, as you mentioned, psychedelics can also play a role in that, along with just, I think, questioning how you see things, and that your thoughts and perceptions aren't the truth. It's just what you're being told, more or less, by the idea of yourself that has been brought up and created throughout your entire life. But with psychedelics, it kind of peels you back a little bit. So you have less built up perceptions and judgments about everything around you. And you're able to see things a little bit more clearly and see that, oh, I was just judging this situation to be this way. So even something as much as good or bad, like that's something I talk about, that I don't think there is any objective good or bad. It comes down to perception in the moment with how comfortable or uncomfortable something makes you feel. So realizing that there's no objective good or bad, you can kind of see things for what they are, and realizing that you can't see the bigger picture necessarily. So even if something really bad, seemingly bad, happens in the moment, you don't know what it'll lead to. Even, breaking your leg going through a traumatic injury. You don't know where that will lead. Going through, social anxiety for me, for example, I never would have created any of these accounts if I hadn't gone through that, because I would have no depth to myself. So in the moment, those few years, I would, in the moment I labeled them as bad, as horrible feeling experiences. But now I'm grateful that I went through those things. Like I'm very happy. So being able to keep that perspective of just not seeing, being able to see the bigger picture and relaxing into that sort of uncertainty, I think can help a lot too.
Yep. Yep. And it's interesting because some people think, like, at this point, okay, but that sounds like a lot of praise for psychedelics in itself. And it's like, look, you can try to get there organically, right? It's simply talking about the necessary like push. For there's a lot of people that you give them all the best perfect advice in the world, but it's going to be really hard for them to fight their own minds and make that progress, and it's going to be over a really long time, and they probably won't stay the path. However, maybe they're given a catalyst. Maybe in this case, it's, they were given a chocolate bar with psilocybin, and they took it home, and they're currently extremely depressed and this and that. You could give them all the good advice you want. There are some people for which it would work, right? And they would work on that naturally. There are other people that need to be pushed off that cliff. That person, they're bored at home. They think that they're going to do this recreationally, and they eat the chocolate, and suddenly they're there like crying on their bed, like going through like some memories that have really like been big parts of holding them back from where they wanted to be. And then they're having that blissful euphoric experience of happiness for the first time in a while, because life's just been really rough to them so far, and boom, they come out of that experience with a massive perspective shift that they would have not had if they had to deal with the very, very gradual adjustment, right? Maybe even after that one single trip, just being able to experience that, they could go, okay, well, I want to be able to do this naturally. But they've been given the catalyst. This is their path, and they've just pivoted in a big way. Whereas what you were asking is for this gradual, it's like turning a boat versus like being able to like turn a go-kart, right? You just need the introduction in the first place.
Certainly. Yeah. And I think too, with even just in my experience, all my sort of experiences with psychedelics, they're a tool, but they don't do the work for you. They allow you to see what's possible. They allow you, this capability of walking through a new door and seeing a different perspective. And then a lot of times that's all that people need. A lot of people, their life changes after one larger dose. And it's not that it was all psilocybin or the psychedelic or whatever. It was them. It just allowed them to see it. It kind of led them there. But then for the long term, it's like, it's still the work that you have to do. And it's still you having all of these new 100%. Thoughts and perspectives. So I think sometimes people almost give psychedelics too much credit. It's like, it's still right. You doing all of these things, all of these, trippy thoughts you have when you're on psychedelics and stuff. That's all you. It's just you without all of the distortion, of all of your worries and fears and judgments and perceptions of the world. Like that is more so who you truly are, without all of your human programming that a lot of it you didn't have a say in either. It's for a lot of people from their childhoods and things they were taught and told, and they were told who they were and how they were and all of these things. So when they have these experiences, they're able to see things more clearly without all of that distortion. So it's like, that's who they really are, more so than even they may be sober, because of all of that baggage and judgment that comes along with them.
And there's a lot of authenticity that comes through as well. If you've built up this mask for society and you've like immersed yourself in that mask and you've lost sense of who you are inside, and the gradual approach is just never going to make it through, you have an opportunity to try this. You really don't know what to expect. And then suddenly you're forced to be aware of the difference between your mask and who you really are and how you've left that behind, right? It's like there's just a whole multitude of like situations in which case I can totally, like psilocybin should be an option, but it's not the way. A lot of people, especially the people that have gone through their trips, they like to go, oh, like, when did you stop? Oh, I stopped when I picked up the phone and like there were no messages, basically. There's nothing new for me to discover, right? I tried tripping and there's just like, the rest of my journey is really up to me in like a like sober like state of mind to continue. Because if I take the psilocybin, it's not really pushing me into anything anymore. I just, like there's nothing left for me there.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I think that's an awesome way to close this off. But Josh, thank you so much for coming on, man. This has been a really cool conversation. I had no idea what to expect going into this. I'm glad we took all of these avenues, and I think it'll be really cool for people to see the man behind Qiwi. So yeah, with that, do you have social media accounts that people can follow you or Qiwi on, or the website, or where people can reach you?
Right. So, our website is like getqiwi.com, and the name is like kiwi fruit, right? But with a Q. So QIWI. The Instagram is Get Kiwi. Anywhere else we're at, we're going to be at Get Kiwi. And me personally, I'm at Josh and C. And it's funny because I feel like I definitely love to talk to you in depth about a couple other stories. I mean, frankly, like we've like scratched the surface. Like there's some stories I don't really talk to with a lot of people. But like, have you ever heard of quantum suicide?
If not, no.
Yeah, it's I wanna leave you with this, and I wanna kind of like just it's probably my favorite defining story. Like it's the one story from my past that I like always tap into for that perspective shift. And it's, from 13 to 18, you're like extra emotionally vulnerable, right? Um, I had just entered foster care at like 16. I had just sued my parents in court. I just got emancipated. It was like this drastic shift because my life prior to that was very sheltered, very stable. I was nerdy, but all I did was play Xbox in school and go home, and that was my cycle, and go to church. There was no disruptions. Fast forward a few years, I'm in foster care and all this stuff, and I'm in a bad relationship, yada yada. And I remember I hit like my tipping point. I had hit so much stress at some point in like my late 16s, where I was going to the bridge connecting the suburbs and Montreal. There's this big fat bridge in the middle. And I remember going there and I thought, like, this is it. I can't like suffer anymore. Right. It was an extremely snowy day. It was like a state of emergency type of day. So there were no cars on the street or anything. So it was just silence. It was just me walking for 2 hours, crunch, crunch, crunch in the snow all the way to this bridge. I walked to a middle point and I crawled down the side of the bridge, and I'm just like in this numb, like apathetic state. Like I'm not thinking about the consequences. I'm not feeling any emotions bubbling up. Like some kind of switch had like broken in me, and like my tolerance for stress was gone. I was just like, this is what I must do. And there were no other thoughts. I climbed on the side of this bridge, and I'm swaying in the wind, and I'm holding on by like I'm holding on to like the bottom rod, basically. And like I remember closing my eyes and I think, oh, all I have to do is let go. I'm like, it's done, right? Like that's it. I finally got like a pang of fear and stress all at once. With it, I kind of see like my life flash before my eyes, at least the important parts. And it's almost like I knew what was happening. It really felt like my brain was drastically searching, like some part of my consciousness or whatever was like, okay, let's look through every file. There's gotta be something in here that's gonna like keep him alive, right? Because we're not trying to die. We go through the whole thing, we get to current events, and then it stops and it's black. And all I hear is the whistling in my ear. My arms are burning from like holding myself up. And I go, well, it looks like there's nothing. And like I let go of my right arm and I'm just dangling there, and I don't have the upper body strength. Like I'm a skinny kid, right, to hold myself up. So I know it's just a matter of time before I just slip off. And I'm kind of waiting for my grip to slip. And I remember it slipped and I let it go and I felt the burning stopped in my arm and I was like waiting for the feeling of falling. And this voice comes out of nowhere and goes, let's just imagine you died. Like, how would it have played out? Do you want to find out? I just remember kind of like mentally like shrugging and opening my eyes, and both of my arms are on the rod. I'm still swaying in the wind, and the pain had just started coming back into my arms. I don't know what happened in that moment, and I've thought about it ever since. And that's always what it's happened to like shift my perspective. No matter how bad it gets, I'm like, dude, like you had a chance to stop all of it, and you didn't. And like, look how it played out. Like now you have a company. Now you're having like an impact on the world. People are thanking you for like, you know, relieving their pains and their stresses and whatever else. Like I feel like I'm pushing into reality and something's popping out, you know, whereas I used to just be like an observer, like I couldn't have an impact. And I remember going home and, you know, I was in my foster mom's like home. She gave me like the entire basement and I just, for 2 weeks, like it was just me looping the same composer, Johan Johansson, right, on loop, like for 2 weeks straight, this beautiful album with really sad piano. And like I came out of that kind of like bubbly almost. I came out of that and I saw my friends and I was like giving life a second chance. I still had all the same hardships, but now the things that had already happened weren't causing me pain. And it was the past specifically. Oh, but I used to have this. I used to have that. It used to be so good. Like I didn't have these issues before. None of that was relevant, right? It was just a matter of who I was now and what my future looks like. And if it didn't look optimal, then I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on the enjoyment of today and having a soda at the theater with my friends, like just like the nuance in life. And no matter like what I've gone through in life, like, you know, if I jumped into like my life story, like I had like left Canada on a bus and I worked construction jobs and I was homeless and I've had this like whole slew of like random like circumstances and I've ended up here, right? And I always think about that one time going like, I'm so freaking grateful for whatever glitch like that was, right? Quantum suicide is the theory that um, uh, because we are 99% empty space, like every atom has so much space within it. At the end of the day, we're just like a really dense hologram, right? That if we understand that everything is just energy and frequency, it wouldn't be so crazy to consider that when you perish, like the energy of consciousness could potentially just, maybe it's shifting to the nearest possible reality where you survived or some other mechanism of the sort. And I don't like, you know, believe that's the case, but I understand its plausibility. And it's just, I'm not the only person with a quantum suicide story. I've met, by sharing my story, I've met plenty of other people who have gone, yeah, I pressed like the trigger on my shotgun. Yeah, I did this. Yeah, I did that. I should not be here today. And I heard a voice or I saw an image and it pulled me back. And it, like, whatever I did, that action that was supposed to stop me from being didn't happen. And I'm still here, right? And that has been kind of the defining factor into me really taking this company seriously. At the end of the day, like the pressure of running a company, I didn't want it. I wanted my comfortable like 9 to 5. I wanted balance. I wanted to see my friends after, and I didn't want to have like my own fate in my hand, basically. But that event basically is the one thing that supersedes it all my anxieties, all my fears. It's the one thing that like brings me back into my skin and makes me want to just like make the most of this one shot, because I will expire, right? I'm not going to be here indefinitely. I have one shot at this life and I almost ruined it. You know, I'm very grateful that I didn't. And I'm looking forward to like doing something with the rest of it. Like, I don't want to get a second chance just to throw it away. You know what I mean? I'd have like this crazy amount of guilt. It would be irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. But frankly, like that doesn't happen to everybody, right? Like there are many cases where it's the end. And why was I given a second chance? I didn't feel like I deserved it. I wasn't doing anything to like matter nearly as much for something like that to happen to me. So instead of being guilty about it, I'm like, let me try to earn that, right? Let me try to get to a place where I feel like, you know what? Like, it was a good thing that you were given this second chance, because look at what you've done for people. And that goes back to like objective function. I was telling you, I have one goal in life, like do as much as I can for people, period, by the time I expire. Whether it's a lot, whether it's a little, all I know is that I have a direction and it's pretty easy to focus on. So a little long-winded, but it's just something I really wanted to like get to. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate you getting that in there before we stopped recording here. But fuck, man, that is crazy. Holy shit. That must be one of the most profound stories I've ever heard. I'm definitely gonna do some digging into quantum suicide and that idea, because that's incredible, and another just incredible perspective. And I have no reason to be happy besides that I'm alive here and now, and that's all I really need at the end of the day.
Right.
So yeah, awesome way to finish off the episode. So Josh, thank you so much. I'll stop recording in a second, but you can stay on for a second, and then we'll close things off. But yeah, everyone, Josh, check out Qiwi if you're interested and have gone through all the products looking for something. Sounds like it is a solution for many. So thanks again for coming on, man. And
My
I'll talk
pleasure.
to you soon.
My pleasure.
All right. Bye, everyone.